South Africa, according to the Global Organized Crime Index, ranks 19th in the world in terms of organized crime activity. That's for you to chew on. Now you can swallow. I think, General, let's start with you. You know, the man who has been tasked with solving this very issue of organized crime. Good luck with that. Are we on our way to becoming a mafia state? Are we a mafia state? And what are you, as the head of organized crime in South Africa, not the criminal, as obviously the police head, what are you doing to stop us from becoming little Colombia, little Mexico?
Quite honestly speaking, I don't think we can actually say we are on our way to becoming a mafia state. Because when you talk about a mafia state, you are talking about a government that in itself is part of a criminal enterprise, where the criminals, where the criminals influence the policy. And what happens? They instruct government, they tell government, they participate, and they in fact, they even choose as to who must occupy which position where. So we are not there by far.
Okay. Anton, South Africa is obviously not an episode of Law and Order. We don't solve crimes and convict people in 45-minute episodes, you know. But what defenses have the NPA put in place to counter organized crime? And does the prosecuting authority actually have the skilled professionals to combat this, especially when one looks at, for example, the embarrassing collapse of the Nulani case?
Okay. So I think the first point to make is, and we have to recognize, and I agree with the Major General, that we're not yet where some pundits have put us. I don't think we're a failed state or a mafia state. But we have to be realistic and we have to be honest. The level of criminality in this country has reached crisis levels. There's no doubt about it. And what organized crime has done is it has thrown 20 million liters of fuel on that fire. We are certainly one of the most crime-ravaged countries in the world, and it is a tragedy every single day what happens, not only with state capture crime and corruption, but with the general levels of violence we see, sexual and gender-based violence in this country. So I think let's start with that point. But I think the narrative that South Africa's lost this battle is not correct. And I think it's a self-fulfilling narrative that does no one any favors except for those that are wanting to escape accountability themselves. And so, you know, we're in a situation now where I think our national director has said that the rule of law is on life support or in ICU. And we must recognize that, because the rule of law is what holds the social contract together in this country. And I'm looking at an audience of people that I know have serious doubts as to whether or not we can rebuild that social contract and rebuild the rule of law. It's particularly complicated in a situation where the kinds of crime we're seeing in this country are interconnected, and the connective tissue between organized crime, state capture, corruption, and many other forms of violence you're seeing, whether it's illegal mining, whether it's housebreaking, whether it's robberies, this interconnection between organized criminality exists. It's becoming more complicated, and just wait until cybercrime really ramps up in this country. And that brings me to your question. Do we have the capacity to respond? Now, I think any first world country, the FBI, you could bring them here. If they were given a week to see the level of the extent of the threat of crime we have, they'd probably pack their bags and go home. So we are really dealing with a serious challenge. But 2 points to make. The first one is, this country is full of many dedicated law enforcement officials and prosecutors, I'll speak on behalf of them, that risk their lives every single day to make sure that that rule of law dream that we all have remains intact. And I'll come back to it at the end. Why is the rule of law so important to South Africans? And we'll speak about that. But there are many prosecutors fighting for it, many police I know that are doing the same thing. The challenge we have is that the growing complexity of the crime we're facing, not only in terms of its transnational connections, but also in terms of its connections within the country, requires a new level of specialization and a new level of focus. Colleagues, we will not prosecute our way out of this problem. There are 3.5 million crimes reported every single year to the police. And when it comes to organized crime, we are going to have to take the 80-20 principle approach. We're going to have to take a targeted, strategic, harm reduction approach which focuses on the crimes that commit the most harm to our beautiful democracy. Those are not always the crimes that get the most headlines. Take copper theft, for example. There's a syndicate behind copper theft that is causing devastation on the poorest and most vulnerable in our country. We need to focus there. We need to focus on particular forms of gangster moves. We need to focus on extortion rackets. And we also need to focus not just on the runners. We need to focus on the high-level kingpins because, colleagues, the good news is the crisis we're in didn't happen by slow attrition. The crisis that we're in, the crime crisis we're in this country, happened by design. It was a man-made crisis. Therefore, it can be a man-made and hopefully a woman-made solution to this crisis. And that's important. We've been there before. We know the lessons. We know how to get ourselves out of the hole we're in. And we're on track to do that. And I hope we can have some time today to have that discussion. Thank you.
Yeah.